Thank you very much, guys. Welcome to the panel. That means clap for us, guys. I know you've got to be sick of seeing me up on stage today. All right, well, we're here today to talk about financial services and some of the unique risks, especially from an AI perspective, that we're seeing within financial services. So my day job, when I'm not playing around as an AI novice, is I'm Kate Kuehn, and I am the Chief Trust Officer for Aon, which is a financial services, professional services, health and benefits, and insurance brokerage organization. Bob, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, Bob Duplessis. I'm the CISO, Physical Security and Operational Risk Officer for Old Second Bank. We're a $6 billion organization with 50 locations around the Chicagoland area.
Good afternoon. Shawn Anderson. I'm the CTO and CISO for Boston Meridian Partners. We're a really, really small boutique investment bank, but I have been a CISO at much larger organizations over my career, and looking forward to the discussion today.
I'm Solomon Smith, the CISO of Momentum Financial Services Group. I've been with a few financial organizations. This one's based out of Canada.
Awesome. Thank you guys very much. So there's been a lot of talk today in all the tracks about risk mitigation and cyber preparedness. And while they're always top of mind for financial institutions, in the advent of AI, particularly when you come to now think about some of the compliance requirements, how do you align the landscape that you're looking at with the changes that you're thinking about every day? You know, what's top of mind for you? Solomon, Bob, you guys want to start?
Sure. Being the CISO for the bank, I always think of myself more as a risk manager for the bank than just regarding information security. Information security is just a small subset of risk enterprise. My role doesn't stop with just the information security. I touch almost every facet, every department in managing operational controls. Those operational controls feed up into the InfoSec program, and it helps me develop the controls and processes, understanding what their controls are and how I can apply the safety and security controls to safeguard the data, apply privacy within. So the more I understand about each business unit and what their services are and their strategic initiatives, helps me understand and develop better security controls throughout the organization.
Solomon, what about you? How do you balance when you're looking in the future and regulatory, and then also what you have to do now?
Yeah, I think the future, and AI specifically, is an ever-changing landscape, just like cybersecurity. You know, 50 years ago, you wouldn't be talking about cybersecurity like you are now. So I think as things continue to change, as regulations continue to change, as everything's trying to catch up, it's an evolving, ever-changing, always learning type of opportunity. And so keeping up, you know, going to conferences like this, Black Hat, DEF CON, they're required to keep up with things that are moving so quickly.
So about gosh, 17 years ago, 18 years ago, Google came into our organization, and I was the CISO for Raytheon's Intel business at the time, and they came in and we did an employee survey. All large companies do employee surveys, and the board said, hey, the employee survey overwhelmingly said that our search capability was terrible, it sucked. So we're gonna go with Google, and the board said, we wanna see it deployed in 2 months. And Google, about that time, if you recall, they built this great search capability on their own servers, and they wanted to come into Raytheon, pull all of our data over to their systems, index it, and push it back to us. Now, for those of you who do not know what Raytheon is, they're a large defense contractor. They build lots of things. They do lots of classified. We've been dealing with this for a long time. And the bottom line was, I called the CISO for the corporation, who was a friend, former Air Force, and I told him, their EULA agreement, their page 3, we suck all your data, index it, and give it back to you. He's like, no, it doesn't. Email. We spent 2 weeks with the lawyers on both sides and our compliance people, and now fast forward, you have to do the same thing. We have to read these agreements as much as we don't, because you probably have 200 apps on your phone and you've never read any of them. But that's the world we live in now.
So Shawn, I'm going to keep the question with you for a second. You know, when we think about technical innovation and security innovation, financial services is usually kind of the industry that's holding the knife in a lot of ways. But when we start thinking about some of the AI adoption, we've seen that other industries, manufacturing, even retail, is further ahead in adoption in certain areas of AI than potentially financial services. How do you think, you know, if you look at the security controls and where we're headed leveraging in light of AI, how do you think the financial services is going to react compared to other, are they going to regain other, I guess, organizations or verticals? Do you think that it's going to continue to have a leadership position? Do you think it's going to destabilize? You know, how do you see that? I know with your role, you work with a lot of startups and younger organizations that may not have the same security maturity as in other financial services companies. So I'm interested in your view on kind of the changing landscapes of security control dominance.
That's a great question. And I do believe that the financial services, because it's all about what? Money. And I think they're going to continue to have to lead. And here's a good example, open banking, consumer identity, and CIAM. The industry traditionally does not like building consumer products for security because there's no money in that. I can go to a large Fortune 500 and get hundreds of millions of dollars to implement security solutions, but if you want to implement for 3 people in your house, there's not a whole lot of money there. So one of the things that's happening is the regulators are establishing that we must have security in these open banking capabilities. People must be able to verify, validate their information. And it's going to continue to lead. If you're from Europe or you go visit Europe, it's even from a simple transaction on your phone or with a credit card, it's never going to leave your site. It still frustrates me here that we don't have that same policy implemented here in the US. They take your credit card every time, and it's so easy to get that information. But finance and whatnot is leading it, and I think the other verticals are going to be healthcare as well, just due to privacy.
Yeah, I'll kind of echo that in terms of the finance industry, and at the end of the day, it's chasing the money. And if the money is opportunistic with AI, they'll be trying to get on the forefront, even though it seems like many times the controls are the lagging aspect. So it'll be interesting to see from a regulatory where they come out with requirements on AI compared to what the industry does, and specifically the finance industry.
Being a financial institution, we're so heavily regulated. I think using any data, using any AI, we'll never be the leader, an innovative leader with it. We want to, first of all, to use data, say like in the financials area of the organization. Anything that we use to make a decision upon has to go through model validations, and it's a very tedious validation of anything that we use for making those decisions, that we're in standby mode. We don't want to be an innovative leader and find that there's a problem or a flaw in any of the calculations that come out of it. From an InfoSec standpoint, there's lots of areas that I would like to use the AI data, especially when it comes to fraud detection, fraud prevention. But when AI has been around for a long time, no doubt that there's systems, third-party vendors that have incorporated AI into their software, and it's my role to make sure that we have safeguards built in, understand the contract, their SLAs, and everything else. The new AI that's being talked about today has introduced a lot of risk in the banking industry. I've taken a proactive stance to sort of curb that and block it from user use of it. We've blocked 20-something. I got to find out what I'm missing. I think you mentioned 26. So there's 3 that I'm missing, but we put firewall blocks. We're not allowing our employees to use these chat tools yet. Because we're afraid that they're going to start sharing data, putting data out into the web, and everyone knows what can happen there. From a cyber standpoint, we're on a defense mode, proactively looking at our controls to see where social engineering, someone posing as the president of a bank. I think one of the sessions today had that. So we took a look at our controls that and put extra layers of security in place that's going to prevent someone posing as somebody, calling in, the voice sounds just like it, or leaving a voicemail. Hey, can you reset my MFA token? Or I got a new phone. We had a customer that got AI'd that way, where they posed as the customer and had or attempted to get their MFA token installed on a new phone. And then went, and I'm probably sharing too much information, but it's out there, it's already starting, and if AI is accessible to our employees and everyone else, it's also accessible to the hacker, and we want to be proactive in blocking that.
Okay, so I am an executive with a financial services company as well, and I know how risk adverse as I lovingly put it, my 200-year-old British startup can be. We like to know what we have in our own controls, and you said it best. We're heavily regulated. We have a pretty good understanding of our tech debt, and we know where our risks lie, I think is the firm answer we would say from a financial services perspective. But there's a problem with all this: trust. So when things go wrong, and we've seen things that have happened outside our control from an advent of AI, you talked about, some of the deepfake attacks that happened in the banks in Asia. But the reputational attacks that we saw in healthcare earlier this year, or the reputational damage from lack of trust or loss of trust because of breach, which is dropping stock on average 8%, is a major concern for financial services companies. So I know, not an aggrandizing plug, one of the things my company did to address the concern of loss of trust and what it can do from a stock price if there's a breach was to install a trust officer. Are we doing the right things for our clients? Are we responding the right way with breach? From the external perspective, are we doing the right things? What about in your organization? How important is this concept of trust? Either the trust you can control through your policies and procedures when things go wrong, or outside your control as you think about the AI adoption and where we're headed next in the model. Solomon, you're nodding at me, so I'm going to let you start.
So I think trust is a challenging one, because I see the trust from an internal perspective, but then also the trust from the external perspective. And so, building awareness inside the company for things like AI, where there's a lot of questions and people don't understand, and people are just don't know what they don't know. So building that trust internally is one avenue that's, just a constant communication, awareness, telling stories, giving people the insight. The flip side of that is having a trustful organization from the outside provides opportunity for the bad guy, bad girl to go after your company. And so you want to have that good image that you're protecting things, but you don't want to go above and beyond saying you're the best of the best and you become a target. And so, that trust is a hard thing, that you want to build that internally within your stakeholders and within your board and your executive team. But externally, you can also go too far and have it become, a detriment to your organization.
I have a little bit of a different spin on this, because I've been a small company, but we deal with large transactions, and people hire us because they need funding, they need to go to a venture cap, private equity, or strategic, and they want to get money to grow, or they have an offering coming in and they want to get bought. And we've started looking, I look at trust along the same lines I look at safety. This is about the safety and the welfare of our economy, of our companies, of our corporate structure. So we use AI. I'll take all of the financials that I can find on a company that we're working with, and I'll toss it into the AI. It's all out there on the web. I just toss it into the AI and start asking, what are your thoughts? Give me the high points so that we can get smart on the companies we're working with. Tell me the red flags that we should be aware of, because we all know that API security and unified threat management, those are terms we just don't want to hear anymore. But there's still companies out there. What's unique? What is this company bringing? And I think that's where AI is really valuable, because you have enough information on your phone today for a bank or a financial institution to make an assessment on whether you're a good candidate for a loan or not. You shouldn't have to even fill out any paperwork. It's just give access to the APIs and they can do the assessment within a matter of seconds. I know that's scary, but it's all right there.
You mean you don't want to hear about the cyber resilience of the zero trust of the API security? Come on. Let's see if we can get buzzword soup on it. Bob, what do you think?
Within our incident response plan, business continuity plan, everything is built around key assets and the availability of services. And that all feeds into overall trust. If we were to fail on having any of our services available, even just for one day, you're going to lose trust. And if it were to be an incident where it went to multiple days, an outage where people didn't have access to their money, access to their debit card, access to their checking, couldn't get cash, that trust is going to just plummet. And so everything we build is based on the foundation of trust around having our services available and making sure we're resilient to any type of incident.
So we've had a lot of discussion, and I was just on the stage talking about AI. I think AI is here to stay for a while. I don't see another AI winter happening anytime in the near future. And the reality, as we talked about, is AI is used for two reasons: cost savings and market differentiation, both of which are highly sought after from financial services companies. And we all kind of do somewhat the same things, so differentiation and being able to look at it on holistic offerings and value props is a critical thing. And I know, at least for my organization, I'm held to the board on a regular basis of how we can innovate and what we can do both internally and externally, leveraging new artificial adoption. So that being said, before we create general AI and all have human cognition issues and where we're headed with that level of AI, but in today's AI, how's that impacting your risk decision making? How is the influence of AI pressure and adoption from a board and a strategic perspective kind of impacting your day-to-day? Bob, I'm interested for you to start on this one.
I think, as I previously mentioned, AI today presents more risk to our environment than it does benefits. AI has been around a long time. A lot of the products and services and tools that are available to us, we've been looking at them, or they're on our strategic initiatives. So AI we're not afraid of. We just don't want to jump into new AI initiatives without seeing some kind of validation of the data and the final product that's put out there, especially in our financial sector, our finance accounting area. We're a public traded company, so we are so heavily regulated on operational controls because of the SOC 404 operational controls. Anything that we do that is made to use and report financial data is so scrutinized. So we do use AI in many instances. It's just that the newer AI that we're talking about today, we're slow walking it. We're not looking to be an innovator with AI.
I look at the CISO and the CSO's roles maturing. If you look at a lot of organizations where there's a CIO, I think their role and their days are numbered because most of them are tactical. They're doing day-to-day blocking and tackling. They're not strategic. And if I'm in the C-suite and you're not strategic, you're a director of IT, you're not a C-level. And I think that we in security now are being elevated slowly, but we have the responsibility to work with the government and make sure that we're doing the right things to get the controls in place. Because AI, to me, is not true AI yet. It's not war games level. It hasn't the ability to make decisions. And what happens as it gets smarter? Will it continue to help us, or do we need to make sure we put controls in there? Because if I were me and I were AI, one day I might get too smart to where I get bored with you, because you're too slow for me. And I know that's like, wow, that's future shit. But it's here. And if you look at the Venn diagram of all the different movies in the sci-fi, we're right in the middle of the whole thing right now, and it's happening. It's exciting. I look at this as big a deal as when the internet came on with ARPANET and they started doing the global scale of a network. AI is that big of a game changer right now, and it's happening across every industry. People in most industries are going to be dependent on financial services because we'll still be around. Retail's going to change, medical's going to change, oil energy's going to change. People are going to have to learn new skills faster now than ever before.
Yeah, I think what you said about the role of the CISO versus the role of the CIO is very interesting, because I agree that I think it's going to change, and I think the technology aspect of what organizations are doing and the impact of AI and what's coming next and how things are going to change is certainly going to have a big impact. And so, I agree with that entirely, and being in the front of that and being the communicator and being the part of the strategy in an organization is a key component, and being able to be in that conversation. I do agree that CISOs are maybe more in that conversation right now, at least what I've seen. But it kind of back to your point of what does that do when the board and the decision makers here, we can make more money if we just go to AI. That's all we got to do, is just got to turn a switch and magic happens. So I think trying to get them educated on what the pros are, but also what the negatives are, and getting people on the same page, because there are a lot of unknowns. And as you said, we've had AI for a while. We just haven't called it, in our organization, we haven't called it AI. We've called it other things, but it's really been there. We just haven't called it that. So the buzzword is getting in there and getting the executives to understand what it means.
It's interesting because, Bob, I would have agreed with you not even 6 months ago as far as that it's too risky at this point. And I've been working heavily with both our internal and our external task force as far as how we're going to look at AI within our own organization. And I didn't realize the little changes that could do profound impact, whether that's looking from a benefits perspective, the advent of a chatbot, whether that's just thinking about from our claims piece, how do we leverage AI to more quickly identify where PII is and potentially damaged information. These processes that can take sometimes weeks, if not months, that we can scale down to days now, leveraging AI from a cost efficiency standpoint with relatively little risk. I couldn't believe how fast I went from being a naysayer from a risk perspective, throwing on my lens, to your point of the role of the CISO, versus my role as an innovator very quickly when I really understood some of the areas. So I think, to your point, we need to figure out a common definition of what we're doing when we're talking about AI from a transformation standpoint, because in financial services, we've used machine learning for a really long time. We don't maybe use robotics as much, unless you want to talk about like ATM machines, which aren't that smart. Let's be honest about it. But there is an AI component that I think has been in the market a long time. And I think, to the point of this panel, I think we're still trying to figure out the role of generative AI and LLM in our traditional financial services arena. I'm going to switch the conversation a little bit. So we've talked about trust. We've talked a little bit about AI. And as we think about this brave new world where we have robots and we've got AI models that could potentially be biased against different versions of people and all this state of things, this concept of an operational resilience model is becoming more and more and more important. And when I think about it from a trust perspective, I look at it in three bolts. You have to assess and identify where your risks live, right? You got to have proactive measures. So do you have the right security controls in place? Are you doing the right things to keep your lights on? Do you have a base level of maturity? What are your transfer options? So where do you weigh and kind of balance your risk with things like cyber insurance? And then how do you recover and respond when you come around the back end? So I want to focus on that transfer piece, because we all deal with security controls, and as the role of a CISO, you got to fill out all of a sudden all of these different forms for your placement of cyber insurance. Don't laugh at me. I know I'm a cyber insurer, just a cyber broker. This was one of the questions suggested. Come on, be nice to me. But the reality is that one of the frustrations for financial services organization is the difficulty to place financial transfer mechanisms, cyber insurance. So how do you guys see cyber insurance today in the marketplace? And how do you think it's going to be impacted as we introduce things like AI risk, the changes in ransomware from traditional ransomware to unrecoverable data bomb as a result from the Russian-Ukrainian war? The reality that we have a bit of a softer market from a cyber insurance perspective. What should we be doing? What is your advice as from a financial services perspective? Who wants to go first? Shawn, you're looking really pondering at the moment. He's like, no way, I'm not taking the mic. All right. He's like, oh my God, I don't want to answer this question.
It's just a lot of different answers. It's like zero trust. I look at the insurance piece as a necessary evil. I have to have it. The question is, like with auto insurance, if I live on XYZ street and I move across the street, there's enough information out there that tells the insurance company, and they look at all my history of driving, they look at my list, they look at where I moved to, and they can tell me down to the penny what my insurance is going to be just by moving across the street. They know the crime statistics and all that. I look at cyber insurance as a little different because we really haven't done a good job in industry of taking a framework and putting that quantitative and qualitative assessment to that framework. I worked at Microsoft for 5 years as an advisor, and the Secure Score came out. And it's great. My Secure Score is 60%, I suck. Why? Well, you haven't implemented MFA. Great. What's it cost me to implement MFA? XYZ dollars. Question, what's the cost of my organization if I don't implement MFA? Well, we don't know. Well, obviously it's a score that I should know and a risk that I should know, but okay, if I don't, can I buy enough insurance? And that's the challenge is I haven't seen the insurance companies working with industry and industry working with the insurance companies to tell you with a fine number of what that risk might be and how much it would cost. Because identity to me is the control plane. If you're not implementing MFA, you're losing the game already. And I don't care how big of an organization. That's why I think SIAM in the financial services is going to be such a big play, because these corporations have to look at the consumer, because at the end of the day, the consumer is the money. The consumer feeds the system. And that's where we have to implement the controls to a framework, and then we layer that insurance on top of my gaps to help me cover so that I can show what I call the due diligence piece.
I love to know that I'm the necessary evil. Thanks, Shawn.
So it's interesting because I agree with your point, and I was just actually thinking about the fact that when we go into organizations, and I agree, insurance is sometimes necessary. I mean, how many times would you go into an organization and one of your interview questions is, well, do you have cyber insurance? And as in, CISO interviewing for a company, and they say no, what's your response? Is this a good company to work for? Are they willing to take on more risks than what they should? What happens if the company goes under? I mean, it's one of these things that you have to have. It's not necessarily a check box, but it's an assurance that you need to go in. And having going through the process right now, yet again, I don't recall seeing a whole lot of questions that drill into AI specific things and saying, what's your stance on it? How are you preventing it? What are you preparing for? What are your concerns? What are your risks around it? It doesn't go into that level of detail. So even just the AI in the cyber insurance world doesn't seem like it's quite there.
Insurance is a topic we can spend hours on because there's so many elements to it, especially cyber insurance. One key element is when you go for insurance, to your point, your cyber program gets scrutinized. You got to present that you have strong controls, audited controls, and then that's going to be part of the decision in the cost of your insurance. Even to get the insurance, having MFA, something simple like that. The insurance is going to cover you up to a certain amount. Obviously, you want that insurance to cover, if you do have a breach, the expense towards recovery, forensics, and the damage control. What the insurance is really there for, too, you could have the greatest security program internally. You really have to understand your vendors. Vendor management, starting with vendor management, asset management, and then all the controls and processes that you have to validate for your third-party vendors helps you get a better understanding that you're in partner with a strong security-minded organization. But you see even the largest companies are getting breached today, and they're down, like MGM. You would think that a casino that large, that big, would have some millions of dollars in security in the tools, and they got breached and got taken down for multiple days. Hospitals are being taken down. We're pretty resilient. Am I confident that it never happened? I would never say that. But third-party vendors, it's a crapshoot in what you're getting with them. We take a look at controls. Without giving a name or whatever, we had a vendor that we put on our watch list twice because of small control issues that I identified where their communication was in clear text, and then they remediated it, and then 3 months later it came back. And because it came back, then it took them a couple months to fix it again, but the real issue that it came back was change management controls. So that gave us some insight that, hey, this one has bad hygiene in their controls, their response to audit, and then lo and behold, they have this breach. So it's in managing third-party vendors, make sure that no matter what insurance levels they say they have, you can't rely on that. You're going to rely on your own insurance coverage and that. So those are just a few points that we take a look at the cyber. You're not transferring risk. You're just using the insurance to cover the expense of that risk.
I see your hand reaching for that microphone. Go for it.
Yeah. We as an industry, for those of us that have been around a little bit longer than others, we grew up on-prem. We built our networks around firewalls and intrusion detection and building a security system so that if somebody wanted to access the data, they had to have a key to a closet in a room in a building, and they had to know where the building was. We cannot build our environments this way. That's why I like the cloud. And some people are like, oh, the cloud's bad, it's so bad. I'm not going to disagree with the cloud providers, although I do all the time. They own the house, so in theory, they have access to everything. So there has to be a shared trust model there at some point. The benefit from an insurance perspective, though, is I can go to the cloud console and I can see exactly what's in my environment at any given time. On my on-prem environment, cold day and for me to ever even have a clue of what I had, because what? You do an inventory asset of your data center, you go in the next day and the rack's gone because somebody came in last night and moved it. And it takes you 6 months before you go back and do that again. So I would ask the insurance, and a lot of risk is done this way, where what? They come in and they're like, oh, we need to do interviews for 2 weeks. Why can't you go to the console, click it on, do the telemetry, pull it into AI, and spit out the report?
I'm working on it.
I know. She really is. But that's what we need. We as a group in here need to push back on legislation. If an auditor is saying I have to come on site for 6 months, I'm like, wait a second, I'll give you access to a portal. You can log in and you can see whatever you want. And I have the authentications in place and all the data's in real time. And that's going to help us to get the data we need to have better data when it comes to insurance, because I can never insure my way out of a problem. It's just not possible.
So you're kind of setting up for one of our later questions, because we're getting towards time here a little bit. And that is, I like to liken our industry today as, I'm a child of the 70s. And in the 70s, my parents had a wooden side station wagon. Everybody remember the old Woody station wagons? Yeah. Some of the people, maybe not. And I was born, and my parents had a wooden box with 2 handles, and they put a blanket in the box, and their little tiny premature Kate was 4 pounds, 2 ounces in the box. And that was totally okay to have me sliding around the back of the station wagon in my box as a newborn. Today, I think my parents would have been hauled into DCFS the moment I left. They hit the hospital parking lot. We have airbags, we have child restraints, we have safety, we have seatbelts. And all of those things from the auto industry were born out of what? Insurance and regulatory. And so I kind of liken the cybersecurity market today as the Woody station wagon with the baby bounced around in a box in the back. We're kind of starting to put seatbelts in place. We're considering airbags. We might even have anti-lock brakes if we're lucky in the next year or two. But that, to your point, the insurance company is going to have to be part of, the insurers are going to have to be part of the process. I'm not an insurer, I'm a broker. So I deal with a lot of different carriers and reinsurers. But I think we need to get to a point, and this is where the question comes in, of a baseline control security framework that we agree on is the level of maturity needed for cyber insurance. Here's your controls, here's your 20 things. Maybe it's MFA, but there's got to be data to back that up. So where do we get the data from? Well, I see it in 2 ways. The breach data and the claims data. And guess what, guys? They're not all the same things, because not every breach is filed for claim. And not every claim is attributed properly to the breach. So we could have a little bit of both, blend. And from there, we could, to Shawn's point, somehow in my voodoo magic over the next couple of years, automate versus self-attestation that process of understanding where your baseline maturity is. It's kind of my view. But if we do all of that, there's the role and the responsibility that goes along with that automation, because it's going to change regulation. And it's going to mean that we can't hide behind the hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil that sometimes our programs do if something goes wrong. So what keeps me up at night is we're starting to see a major change in the role of the CISO and the role of the board in regards to cyber. So one of the gentlemen earlier today talked about Joe Sullivan. I'm not going to talk about Joe Sullivan. We've also seen now the case of SolarWinds CISO. I'm not going to talk about that. But we've also seen now 2 boards held criminally negligent for allowing bad software to hit the marketplace. We're now starting to see responsibility from a legal criminal perspective falling on the shoulders of the CISO and of the board. So if that's the case, the role of the CISO is kind of morphing into what I think of as a chief risk executive, because you have to have somebody on your staff that's kind of the legacy CISO role, who's going to keep the lights on and understand the technical aspects and how they align with business drivers. You're going to have somebody really good at regulation and understanding all the regulatory pressures. And then you're going to have somebody that needs to look at innovation and things like AI and all the mad scientist stuff that we haven't even thought about yet. And then in the middle, you got to have somebody who understands cyber insurance if you're going to have a strong financial transfer. So I'm starting to see kind of this chief risk executive, and I've seen some companies now pull the mold. And if you're really lucky, you have a chief trust officer like me to protect all the stuff that you're doing from an external perspective. Don't laugh at me. What do you guys think? Is the role of the CISO changing? And in financial services, how do you think it's going to change over the next couple of years? Solomon, you look like you're dying to answer my question.
Yeah, because I do feel like that is the direction that it needs to go. I don't know if organizations are ready to not necessarily let it go that way or prepared to let it go that way, but I think that's the way it should go because of the insight of the background. I feel like a lot of the chief risk officers right now in title probably have came from an audit background, which is great, but it's a different world to come from a combination of IT, security, audit, business, and strategy. That is a different combination where I see a lot of the CISOs have that sweet spot, whereas I think just a traditional chief risk officer is more of a audit type of a background. But I agree that having that risk management component is going to be severely important. I mean, it's going to be really, really important for organizations going to that next level. So I would agree with you entirely.
Shawn's pondering. Bob, what do you think?
As I mentioned, I feel myself as more of a risk manager. My entire InfoSec program rolls into enterprise risk. I report directly to the chief risk officer. 5 years ago, they moved my role to report in that area only because they didn't know where to put me, to be honest with you. But we did sit through and really think it out because do I report to chief operations officer, chief financial officer? Everywhere you looked in that hierarchy, there was conflict because here I'm reporting to operations that doesn't want anything bad reported, that there's bad controls. They didn't want me with the CTO because I'm the one actually looking over at his controls and I have to report any control gaps. That could be a conflict. So the best fit was moving me to the chief risk officer with a direct line to the risk board. So if there is any conflicts, if anyone was doing something they shouldn't do, then I have a direct line to even go over to risk officer to make sure that is communicated to the board. Without that direct line, I could be, hey, I'm your boss, you do what I tell you to do, and that doesn't work either. But the point is, I definitely feel I'm more on the risk side, almost like an auditor, than I am just the cyber IT risk controls. Because I literally do touch every aspect of banking, every department. And my operations background, I had 20 years operations. That's why the operation controls and risk controls throughout the organization stuck with my CISO role. It was just a perfect fit.
Okay, Shawn, your turn.
Thank you. If you've been a CISO, and you're in a unique position because most CISOs get into their role and they have no budget, they have no staff, they have no time. And they have to become a friend to everybody. I realized rather quickly when I was in the military working as an MP there were two different groups. There were one where I had colleagues who would go out and write tickets to everybody. Well, if you write a ticket to the people that are in charge of your vehicles go down for maintenance. So you have to compromise, and you have to work across boundaries. And if you want to be a part of the C-suite and you want to work with the board, you've got to make friends, and you've got to go get the lawyers on your side to be able to explain the risk. Because if you go to the board and say the sky is falling, the APTs are bad, which it is, it's going to fall on deaf ears. And if you want a seat at the table, you've got to be in their circle. And I found for the most part, they may not be technical, but they're on the board for a reason. These are rather savvy people that are, some of them have come from wealth. They came up through the bootstrap. A lot of company, corporate, they start out small business. They became an executive one day, and now they're on boards. If you're speaking their language and you understand how to turn it into business terms, you're going to go a lot further. I think that is something that we have a tremendous opportunity as CISOs because we're still fairly new. If you look at the definition of CFO, you can probably go back a few thousand years, and a CFO has done the same thing for a few thousand years. Same thing with some of the other C-level. But with the CISO, you have to be able to explain to them why identity is the control plane and be able to understand what it means to the business. And if we don't implement this, we're going to lose money. Always goes back to money. And if you talk in their terms, you'll get their ear a little bit easier.
Okay, so before we go to questions, what advice do you have to the risk professional in the audience that's working or consider working in financial firms? What have we missed? What other advice should we be giving from a financial services perspective? Solomon?
What advice? I think the advice I would give is always be learning, always be curious, always try to understand. And I think to your point of building relationships is key. The traditional no in security just does not work. So I think building those relationships, showing that you're willing to learn, and gathering as much information as you can is a key.
I found one way that'll help, go back and kind of do a litmus test. You can do this with your own team. Find out how many of your so-called security or IT professionals actually have any level of certification. And I'm not CISSP level here. I'm talking even a basic, have you ever sat through a Security Plus course? Have you ever sat through a Network Plus course? Both times that I've been in the CISO position and worked in that technical field, I offered to teach to anybody who wanted to come. And I got more goodwill out of that course going across the organization because I was able to explain the difference between due care and due diligence, symmetric and asymmetric cryptography. And while it might seem mundane to a lot of us in here, going, well, that's just motherhood and apple pie, everybody knows what that is, they don't. And they don't understand if you know you have a problem, you have an obligation to do something about it. And I think that's one thing that I would do if I were in your shoes, is just go back and offer to share your knowledge and train up and bring people into your fold to build those relationships and those alliances.
One of the things I think that has benefited me the most, and I think I'm going to jump on something Scott said earlier, is don't be a one-dimensional CISO. There's, I think, three types, operational, tactical, and strategic. You need to fill all three of those roles. Having just the technical aspect or the operational aspect is not enough. You really need to get in the weeds, understand your organization, know what the assets are, put in controls commensurate with the risk on each of those assets. You want to protect your crown jewels, but there's so many other things that you need to really understand about your organization to really apply the value of the CISO role.
I think, there's some good points to take from here. And to summarize what you guys said, the key points I heard was, I think we sometimes need to remember when we're talking to our boards and our executive teams that they don't speak the same language we have. I used to complain when I was in a role that was non-CISO, the moment I used a different title like CEO or board of director or things like that, my CISO and my technical friends would start talking really slow to me, and that I didn't understand the technical talk anymore, because it's not common for other C-levels to have that type of understanding. On the flip side, the moment I was a CISO, again, all of a sudden my business friends would be like, do you really sure you understand what the board report's going to say? It's not very technical. So there's a stigma there. And so trying to find a common language, I think, is key. Building relationships. And I love your thought about teaching the class. I think that's awesome. The other thing that I think is important to remember is, as we look at new opportunities from an AI and innovation standpoint, is to really understand where it aligns from a business risk perspective. So there's the technical aspect, there's the business aspect, and what is the opportunity that's driving the request? Does the technical staff, does the CISO and his staff understand the business reason or ramification the opportunity is being looked at? Because I can't tell you how many times I get in front of boards where the CISO's like, Kate, I don't understand why they're asking this. Like, I think they're talking threat, but they're talking risk, and they're saying it's this and they're saying it's that. And I'm like, well, haven't you seen the board report? Well, no, why would I read that? Do you know what your top 3 initiatives are? Well, from da-da-da-da, I'm going to implement MFA, and we're going to look at that. I'm like, no, for the company. Oh, I've never seen that. Understand. And the third thing I'd say is, as we look at holistic from a financial services perspective, is, again, that concept of trust. Customer trust, understanding the impact that is within our control as far as implementing good sound controls and systems, but also outside our control, which really the only thing we have at our disposal when there is a reputational attack or reputational damage because breach is communication planning. And are we paying enough attention to that in the wake of AI? With that, any questions, guys, for our amazing panel? Thank you, guys. This has been amazing. I've learned a lot today. Oh, you're still my mic? Okay.
I just need one for questions. Questions? There you go, man. Thank you. I'm going to approach this question not from probably the way people would or were intended to here as security people, but as a customer. And what I heard today was a little bit on the scary side. What I heard was cyber insurance is, first of all, not very well understood, and second of all, that the companies that would be good, and I learned a long time ago, your insurance is only as good as a company, is not all very well understood. Is that the message that that's the message I understood today? Is that the message that was given?
Yep. I've got an answer, but Shawn's going to answer first. Oh, and Bob, I think.
I wouldn't say that it's. I look at it as it's kind of it's in a maturing process. If you look at global warming, and you look at the insurance industry, there's hurricanes, there's a lot of storms coming up through, and in Florida, the insurance companies tried to get out of the state years ago, and the government said, no, you can't do that, you're necessary, you have to be there. Well, they had to go back and look at their policies because a lot of people were complaining that my house was destroyed in the hurricane. No, your house was destroyed because water came into your house and you had 4 feet of water, so it was a flood, so you need flood insurance. And I think that's where cyber insurance is at today. We're still trying to figure out and working with industry the parameters of what that is, what it's going to actually cover, because it's one of those, and I really am frustrated by this 4-hour reporting thing of you think you have a breach, because it takes an investigation to figure out what actually happened, and it can take days, months to figure these things out. And because of the way the cloud is designed and the internet's designed, and I think this is why we have to have these discussions, where did they actually come in from? Was it internal? Well, define internal. If I have an employee on travel and they're in Europe, they're an employee on our network still just because they're in Europe. That's internal to me now. Whereas 10 years ago, industry would not have said that's internal. They had to be in a physical building. So that's where I think, from my perspective as a practitioner, we're still working through the kinks, I guess, of what it's actually going to mean to insure me cyber protection-wise versus my car or my house, because we have 100, 200, 300 years of trying to figure that one out.
So let's take the term insurance out for a second. We have financial transfer mechanisms, whether it be insurance or other policies, for almost every area of operational risk. What we're saying here is cyber insurance to some degree is still in its infancy, considering that I'm a 200-year-old company and some of my lines of insurance have been around for all 200 years. And we're in the middle of a change. So cyber insurance is for the silo of cyber risk. What did we talk about today? Does cyber risk live within its own silo, or is it across everything at this moment? It's across everything. So we're in the process of understanding as an industry, and again, my company is a brokerage business, not an insured. There's a big difference there. Is the question of how do we start speaking a common language how do we approach insuring cyber risk? Do we need a control plane that's the same irregardless of the insurer? We're still working with that from both an industry and a government perspective. How do we address the fact that right now it is a bit of a dark art? There's self-attestation, which again, are humans perfect? No, humans are flawed. How do we leverage the tool sets we already have without introducing another API? Because if I put one more API in any one of their organizations, they may break my thumbs. So how do we pull the right set of data to get a more comprehensive view of an environment, but make sure the controls are addressing the risks of today? So what we're saying is we're in a bit of an emerging space when it comes to cyber insurance. I'm very positive about it. I represent a company that does a lot within that space. But we are in an emerging space, and it will continue to emerge as we continue to understand where risk is headed. Next question. Who else has a question?
Said you had a follow-up? You know, one of the things that's critical about cyber security is you've used the term immediacy today. Like, well, I can get into this right away. And of course, that's how the web was sold to all of us, is you can get into it right away. The problem is, that's why we have password managers these days and need cybersecurity, is because now we got 40 websites we have to get into, and quite frankly, I don't want to spend the whole week getting into websites to check my investment here or this, there, or any other place. And that may play into reputation, but in that area, at least in reputation, I would say the IT community, maybe not the AI community, but the IT community is performing rather poorly, because the two words I hate to see on a chat thing is, I'm here to help you, ... or your call is very important to me.
Good feedback. I think the critical thing to remember is chatbots and the AI that helps us from a customer service perspective, kind of like some of the other things we talked about, is still in its infancy. We're still training the models. We're still trying to figure it out. And I don't know if we're ever going to get to a point where we have one common interface for all of our companies. Not going to happen. I really don't think that's going to happen at this point. But it does cause, you know, as we innovate as an organization and as we innovate in how we approach customer service, there's going to be frustrations. You know, there were frustrations when we stopped using calling cards and we're going to use what to get on a phone, and we have cell phones now and we're going to do X and we're going to do Y in the innovation piece, but we learn over time. So I hear your point. I don't think I have a good answer on how to solve it. With that, anyone else, one more questions? Otherwise, we're going to thank our panel and get to our next piece. Okay, thank you guys. Cheers.